This episode of Test Drive is made possible by RateMyEV.com.
Back in 2022, Volkswagen announced the return of the iconic bus, now as an electric vehicle known as the ID Buzz. But like the Hummer EV when it was announced, I figured this vehicle would never go into production for being just too niche. But it is refreshing to see a brand take a chance, a big risk, on a vehicle as cool as this. This is the 2025 Volkswagen ID Buzz First Edition 4Motion. Today we're going to be talking about everything you need to know about this vehicle, how I think it stacks up in the marketplace, is there a market for it, and everything else you need to know if you are in the market for a $90,000 microbus. Let's get started. Alright my friends, let's just rip the band-aid off. Pricing. This vehicle, base price $82,995 Canadian, or about $69,000 in the US, as tested with the two-tone paint. We've got the panoramic sunroof. We've got all the options that you can pretty much get on this. You're looking at $89,000 Canadian or $71,500 in the US. This is a pretty pricey vehicle. Now there's one thing to note if you're in the US, you might notice that we have the cognac leather interior that's only available here in Canada. Interestingly enough, in the US, the Dune is the only interior, at least that I can tell, that's available on the first editions. Now here in Canada also, we only have the first edition. So unlike in the US where the first editions are all two-tone, we do have the option for the black and like dark gray full color instead of the two-tone with these funky ones. But honestly, if you're buying a bus, you really got to go with the color options. So here in North America, we only have the long wheelbase version of the ID Buzz. There's a short wheelbase version in Europe. We don't get that here. We also have two motor configurations. This being the 4Motion one, it's 250 kilowatts or 335 horsepower. The rear motor makes 413 pound-feet of torque, with the front making 99 pound-feet of torque. Go rear-wheel drive only, you're looking at 210 kilowatts or 282 horsepower, same amount of torque. Now we have a 91 kilowatt-hour gross, 86 kilowatt-hour net battery. It's not huge for such a big vehicle such as this, but interestingly, the range is about the same, no matter whether you go with the rear-wheel or 4Motion version. 377 kilometers or 234 miles of range with the rear-wheel drive. You go up to the all-wheel drive, you're only losing 5 kilometers or 3 miles, 272 kilometers or 231 miles of estimated range. Now, it depends on what you're doing with your bus. If you're in town a lot, you're going to see a much better number. I've seen over 400 kilometers of range because I do mostly in-town stuff. So with regen braking, I'm recouping some of that energy lost. Now, when it comes to charging, you have an 11 kilowatt onboard charger, which isn't bad. 200 kilowatt DC fast charging isn't great. So I think one of the things that will hold this back for some people, considering the original bus was meant to be a camper, a road trip vehicle, something that you took all over the country or the continent, it will be a little bit slower to charge this if you do plan on road tripping with it. And then with the limited range that you get out of it, there's some limitations there as well. Let's talk a little bit about the exterior design when it comes to the ID Buzz, because it truly is a head turner. We have full LED headlights up front. Volkswagen calls them their IQ lights, very similar to the ID4 that we've seen. Sure, they could have gone with the rounder headlights to really give it a throwback look, but Volkswagen has decided to adopt more of a current design language that they're using across the board. We do have this massive front windshield, which really is like inches from the very front of the bus. You also have access to your windshield washer fluid, as you saw with the mechanical specifications. We had that popped open. You also have opposing windshield wipers, so they will wipe opposite directions. Some people like those, some people don't. And then the Volkswagen badge in the middle will be illuminated as you're driving at night with the headlights on, which I think is a cool thing. Now, I don't know how people are really going to classify this. Volkswagen says it is a microbus. Technically, it is a minivan. You do have power sliding doors like you would expect to find on a minivan. It does sit a little higher up because the batteries obviously run across the bottom of the vehicle, so you have a much higher, egress and ingress. So if you're a little harder to get into things, this might not be the vehicle for you, but that does work pretty well. We do have power folding mirrors, and then with the two-tone paint, you can really see how the vehicle looks. And honestly, I think it looks really good. The two-tone really sets it apart. The massive windows and glass helps to give this vehicle really those nostalgia vibes, but allowing the passengers inside to really be able to see the outside world as you're driving along. So overall, Excellent design. Great job, Volkswagen. You'll see I have some B-roll. Managed to find a Type 2 second generation bus in the same color. And if you look at some of that B-roll, you can start to notice where Volkswagen took inspiration from that generation and other generations of the bus to make this one. Excellent design. Good job, Volkswagen. You really nailed it. Well, folks, today's a hot one. It's super early in the morning. I tried to get here as early as possible. It's already 30 degrees. I'm dying. But luckily, when we get in the car, the AC works well. Let's talk a little bit about the back, because I took this vehicle last night to the St. Thomas Nostalgia Nights car show. It was a retro car show. It doesn't have to necessarily be older cars, but I figured the bus is the most iconic when it comes to that nostalgia feel for people. And I had a lot of people checking this out, and I talked to a lot of people about it too, and people said that the back end really was their favorite part of it. Really does give that old school bus kind of vibe to it. We have an LED light bar that runs along the entire width, and there's also different LED patterns when you approach the vehicle, which I think is kind of cool. You can customize your bus just in case you happen to park next to somebody that has the same color as you. Maybe you'll have a different LED animation. Massive Volkswagen badge at the back with the ID buzz along the bottom. And then this is a power opening tailgate, as you would expect. But you got to keep in mind, this thing is massive. It's huge. Look at it. This is like Tahoe territory, if not bigger. But the trunk space is very functional. We do have two trays branded with Volkswagen on them. They're sort of like those collapsible boxes that you can buy for your house. So you can use those for storage. And then there is a shelf, a very sturdy shelf, because the material itself is pretty solid. And then there's an actual frame that it sits on when it is down. So you can put heavy items on there. I've put my groceries and whatnot, allowing you to still have storage underneath. And then when it comes to folding the seats flat, as you would expect, there's just a pull tab. You can drop both of the rear seats pretty easily so that they are flush with your table. And then same thing with the second row, no problem. You can fold those flat as well. So if you wanted to use this for cargo, you have the option there. But because this is an electric vehicle and the floor makes up the batteries, there is no option to actually fold the seats into the floor. So we see with a lot of minivans, at least, the third row does go completely flush to the floor. You're not getting it with here. So when it comes to the ID Buzz, it isn't as functional as a regular traditional minivan. All right, now we're inside the Volkswagen ID Buzz. I'm telling you, it is just oppressively hot. It's been like this all week. So you will have to believe me that I have sat in all three rows of this vehicle, and I do fit. That is one nice thing about this. This is a very tall vehicle. If you compare it to other minivans, the overall height is quite a bit more than any other minivan on the market. So seating is pretty good. This is the 6-passenger configuration. So we have the captain's chairs in the second row, and the third row can fold out as well. So I mean, like if you need to kind of remove the seats, you have the option there. But overall, there's some good flexibility. The second row seats can actually recline and slide pretty close to the front. And while I was testing, I was actually able to bring the seat up as close to the passenger seat as possible, where my wife would sit, and I still had room. So for whatever reason, if you need to fit people in here, 6 people very comfortably, I think you're going to be fine. So a couple of features in that second row. You have heated outboard seats. With captain's chairs, it's all you get. Keep in mind, though, they will not turn on unless your seatbelt is buckled. I think that's a very interesting thing, meaning that you must be safe in order to use them. I mentioned you have the power sliding doors. The windows there, I think they're on the useless side of things, but maybe it's good if you have a dog. That way you can open up that window, and it's not as big for them to jump out from. But the window is on the small side given the amount of glass you do have there. It is power. It is controlled from either door. And then just like we've seen on other newer Volkswagens, including the ID4, in order to control it from the front seats, you have to push the rear button, which is like not a real button. So sometimes it doesn't click properly. Bit of a pain there, but overall that works. Now, one thing I want to talk about before we talk about the front area is the removable buzz box. This is an accessory that you can add on if you want a couple of them, but it is a configurable tray that you can move to a number of different positions within the vehicle. You just eject it, and then you can put it in the second row. You can put it in the middle of the front 2 rows, or as I have it up here in the front for me. There's a little storage tray that comes out, another little pocket to be able to put things, and there are places to put cups. I wouldn't say I would put anything too big in them, and they also, because they're not true cup holders, they're more little dividers. If you're going to be moving around in the vehicle, they could slide around and tip over. So there are cup holders for the front passengers, but there isn't anything really built in for the second row. So this is the best that you get. I think it's cool that it's configurable, although you'd have to buy another accessory if you wanted to have the actual cup holders for the second row seats. That is something that Volkswagen sells as an accessory. Now let's talk about the front here. There is a lot to talk about. I've mentioned several times when it comes to some EVs like the Equinox or the Bolt that you feel like you're driving a shuttle from the Starship Enterprise. And this really is a shuttle because man, oh man, do you just have a plethora of space. I can't reach the windshield from where I'm sitting. Like, it's so far away. You could use that for storage. You know, when we went to the car show yesterday, I actually had my little Lego Volkswagen Type 2 first generation bus sitting on the dashboard because there is so much dashboard that you have plenty of places to be able to put stuff. But anyway, you have a ton of windshield space. One downside to that is because the roof line here is so long from where I'm seated, it is hard to see some traffic lights. If they're a little bit higher up or it's a smaller intersection, so they're closer to me, I do have to duck down and look to see the traffic lights. We do have A pillars and B pillars. Normally something you don't have for the front passenger because we do have a window in the center here. And surprisingly, visibility is pretty good. Aside from upper visibility for traffic lights, I can see everything around pretty well, and the blind spots are actually not too bad. When it comes to the features on the inside here, we do have heated and ventilated front seats. Driver has memory, and there's also massage functionality, which is quite nice. It does have a little bit of pulsation depending on which mode you put it on. We have the little cluster screen that comes and moves along with your steering wheel. Shows you things like your speed, basic information like your trip, and your active cruise control stuff. But the infotainment is actually pretty good, despite the fact that we don't have any physical buttons, right? Everything is controlled through, capacitive touch buttons on the screen. The infotainment itself actually works well. The maps are pretty good. We have a built-in assistant called Ida, which you can ask it to do many different things, and it's actually pretty decent. You can also change its name. So if you wanted to say, "Hello, computer," it will respond to you. So I think that's a really cool touch. We haven't seen that on too many vehicles. Nothing that comes off the top of my head. You can actually customize how you wake that system. So I like that quite a bit. And you can also disable the original system too. So you can only wake to "Hello, computer." But we have dual zone smart climate control, and this is probably the best implementation that I've seen. I'm seated here in the driver's seat, only air is flowing to me. Now, if I turn on max AC, all the vents turn on at maximum. But it isn't until somebody gets into the passenger seat will that actually turn on. And there's no need to do anything. It just does it automatically. But it's smart enough to also know if there's somebody in the rear seats, it will turn on the third zone in the back, but not necessarily the front one if there isn't a passenger up here. So for me, I drive my daughter around pretty often on my own, which means I don't need to have the passenger air vent going, so it doesn't. Great stuff. This is actually really, really well done. So the infotainment itself is, I'd say, 9 out of 10. The only thing that I'm docking a point for is the camera system. These are really poor quality cameras. They're very grainy, very fuzzy, doesn't give you a lot of definition. I'm very surprised by that. I know we've talked about it on the past with other Volkswagen vehicles. I just kind of hoped at $90,000 Volkswagen would have put better equipment for those cameras, because this is actually an enormous vehicle to have to maneuver. I have been in a couple of drive-thrus that it has been extremely tight, and there isn't really an easy access button to get to the camera, so you just have to rely on being close enough to the parking sensors that they will trigger the camera automatically, put it into reverse in order to pull up the camera system, or just hope. And then the other thing too, when I'm pulling into a parking spot, I like to back in just because of how big the vehicle is and where I'm seated versus the windshield. It really throws me off. So I'm often, pretty much every time, too far back from where I need to begin my reversing. So I have to do a 3-point turn to get into the spot. These are things that you'll probably learn as you get comfortable with the vehicle. I've had it for a week now and I'm still not. So just keep that in mind. A couple other features that we have on here: a 13-speaker Harman Kardon audio system. Sounds pretty good. We also have a wireless phone charger with USB ports in the center here. Tons of storage, actually. A lot of good places to be able to put things. There's USB-C ports in the doors, so the passenger and rear passengers and third row have access to be able to charge their devices. And then we also have what I would say is probably one of the nice, quirkiest little features I've seen: little play and pause buttons on the pedals. The play button is your gas, your accelerator, and your pause is your brake. I mean, come on, how cute is that? But let's take it on the road now. I want to talk about A, how the vehicle is to drive, but B, should anybody be buying it at 90 grand? Let's get started. All right, let's talk a little bit about the energy efficiency before we talk about the rest of the vehicle. Here we completed our 100 kilometer test loop in normal mode. There's an eco mode, but we did it in normal in 20.6 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, which actually isn't too bad considering this is a fridge on wheels, right? It is somewhat aerodynamic. It's a lot more aerodynamic than, say, the Mercedes G-Wagon I just had. But when it comes to overall energy efficiency, I mean, it is kind of in line with other vehicles that are smaller than this. But the overall range, like I said, hasn't been fantastic. I mean, I'm at 426 right now, 97% battery. We didn't, I didn't have it plugged in and then remote start it because there is no remote start function on the key fob. You have to schedule just like you would with most electrics. And then I imagine if you have the Volkswagen app, there'd be an option there to be able to remote start the vehicle wherever you are. So some of the things that we don't have access to as journalists, but you might have access to as an actual owner. But for the most part, the range hasn't been a big concern for me because I do a lot of stuff here in town. Even picking this up from Ajax and driving it all the way back to St. Thomas, which was like a 250 kilometer drive, didn't faze me. I wasn't worried about running out of electricity on the way. Now, we've talked about before that 350 kilowatts for DC fast charging should be the norm by now. So at 200, you are a little limited, but I don't know. I mean, I guess it depends on what you're going to be doing with the vehicle. I don't know. I mean, I talked to people. Most people didn't even know this existed when I was talking to them at the car show last night. They had no clue Volkswagen came out with this because there's just no marketing for it. But the other people who did know about it, once they found out the price, they were kind of turned off by it because the original Type 2 bus was an affordable thing. It was unique in the marketplace, but it was affordable and it allowed people to explore their country or their province or their state or their continent. Whatever they decided to do, they pretty much could do with their Type 2. I don't see the same thing with this because the range is quite limiting. That's for one. And then two, it's not as functional as a van, right? We talk about that a little bit with the trunk space, but that's sort of the conclusion I've come after driving this vehicle. It's not a great EV because the range isn't that good, and it's like energy efficient enough, but it's not the best. If you need a very large 3-row electric vehicle and you want range and you want charging capabilities, well, Kia EV9 or Hyundai Ioniq 9 are going to be the options for you. If you're looking for a minivan, right, you want something that the seats can fold flat or be removed, have cargo capacity, have passenger capacity, well, this doesn't cut it either, right? I mean, even at 7 passengers, it's all right, but it isn't the best. So you'd be better off like with a Sienna hybrid. You're going to save a lot more money. It's a lot less than this, and okay, it's not electric, but you could also get the Pacifica plug-in, have some electric. So it depends on what you want, but the problem with this, unfortunately, is there isn't a standout feature. Except for the roof, you can turn it off with the flick of a finger, and it'll frost the glass. Then you can swipe again, and it unfrosts it. That's really the party trick of this vehicle, outside of it being probably the coolest thing I've ever driven. And that's the problem, right? The ride is okay, the comfort's good, the space is fine, the electric stuff is good, the performance is good too, right? I mean, we're in normal mode. If I floor it, oh yeah, buddy, we're up to speed, no problem. Push that play button at the bottom. It's all good. The brake regen, I keep it in brake mode. It works extremely well. Like, I've enjoyed driving it. But the problem is, the real selling feature of this car is the fact that it's so cool. But can you put a price on cool? Volkswagen seems to think it's about $90,000 as configured. Yes, in the States, you can go with a lower trim. You won't have as many gadgets. You'll still have the same kind of look to it. And, if you go without the 4Motion here, without the sunroof, you're looking at less than 85 or so. But is that enough to drive sales? I personally don't think so. I have not seen a real one. There is a blue and white one here in town, But if you don't know about St. Thomas, Ontario, we are the future home of the new Volkswagen battery plant. And PowerCo, the company that's running it, has a bus because they're partially owned by Volkswagen. It's a Volkswagen company. So you would expect that they would have one there. Now, it just sits there most of the time. So I kind of have to think that it's like a floater vehicle. Employees are allowed to request to be able to use it and drive around, but it pretty much just sits at PowerCo plugged into the charger all the time. That is the only one I've seen ever, except for the ones at Volkswagen HQ. So I've never seen one on the road. So I haven't seen anybody who's actually bought one of these. So my question then comes down, like, is this a vehicle that somebody is going to spend the money on outside of it being super cool? Because it's 90 grand. And I mean, if I'm spending 90 grand on a vehicle, I want it to either be extremely accommodating to what I'm doing or have ample amount of range or something, right? There has to be some real draw to it other than it being really cool. And I just unfortunately can't find it with this vehicle. It's just, the whole thing is it being so unique. And that's sort of the flip side too. Yeah, it's a problem for sales, but I have to give Volkswagen credit. In fact, like, if I wasn't driving, I would give them a standing ovation right now. I would give them a full round of applause because it is so rare, if not never happens anymore, that a brand will take an enormous risk like this to put out a vehicle that pretty much they know will never sell. I can't imagine that Volkswagen, at least for the North American market, had research that showed people are willing to spend $90,000 on a 6-passenger bus that's electric with 385 kilometers of range or 372 of official range. Like, there should be zero data that shows that that will sell. But the folks at Volkswagen said, forget about the numbers, forget about the data, let's do something cool. Thank you. Thank you for making this. It has been one of the best weeks that I have ever had in a vehicle. Truly. Is it fun to drive? No, not necessarily. Is it because of all the features or tech? No. It's the fact that absolutely every single human being that I pass by, whether I'm on the road or it's parked or it's in my driveway, everybody loves it. Everybody. People have stopped. I have seen people, their jaws literally drop out of their mouth because they have never seen this vehicle in their lives. They have no idea it even exists. So that has been one of, if not the best experiences of my entire automotive career, is just seeing the joy. I had mentioned to my wife, and I think I even posted it on Instagram, that I'm like Santa Claus, bringing more joy to people every day than he does. He does it once a year. I've done it for 7 days straight now. And yeah, I mean, that is really the reason why you would want to buy one of these. It's just, I can't recommend buying it unless you've got the money. Unless you have money's not an issue and you don't really worry too much about the range or anything like that, then go for it. I mean, you will have one of the only ones in your neighborhood or even your city or your area. There's not going to be a lot of them on the road. So you'll be driving something very, very unique. But it's not just about what I think about these vehicles, right? We always recommend that you do your research before you're buying a vehicle, whether it's a new one or a used one, electric or gas. But there is a place to get all of the electric reviews that you need. If you're shopping maybe a number of different types of vehicles, you want to know how real owners have actually enjoyed or had problems with their different electric vehicles, you got to check out our sponsor, RateMyEV.com. They are the source for owner-based reviews of all sorts of electric vehicles sold, including really obscure things like the Ford Focus Electric, and you might even find a review on this Volkswagen ID Buzz if somebody's bought one. And we also encourage you, if you own an electric vehicle, share your thoughts. It is a very detailed process. You can either leave just a 5-star, 4-star, whatever review and say, yeah, it was great, that's it. But if you want to go really in-depth, RateMyEVs.com has almost, not like an endless amount of questions, but they have a very thorough amount of questions that you can answer about your electric vehicle. So big thanks to them for sponsoring our electric vehicle content here on Test Drive. You can check them out. The description has a link as well as the lower thirds to RateMyEV.com. So yeah, I mean, my rating on this though, it's tough. If I were to give it a 5-star, it's like 5-star and cool, right? But everything else, it's kind of there. but I've loved it. I mean, I adore this little vehicle. I hope people buy them. And I will do as other people have been doing to me all week. If I see one of these on the road, my jaw will drop as well, because they're just cool. I mean, it's such a cool car. But aside from that, though, I think that's about it for this episode of Test Drive. If you have any questions about my little ID Buzz here, you want to know more about it, you want to know specific thoughts, things like that, please let us know in the comments below. We do try to get back to everybody that we can. And if you have any questions about what we're doing here on the show as well, there's a new community page on YouTube allowing us to directly communicate with you without having to go through a video. You know, we don't have to necessarily post something, so you can just leave comments and let us know what you think. So check that out. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. We highly encourage it, and we'd like to have you on board so you can see the latest episodes. But that'll do it for me today. I need to go have a shower after the already ridiculous heat that we have here today. So thanks for watching, and until next time, take care.